Hi everyone, welcome to the ninth ever Amos Product Call. My name is Dominic Timel, and we're here today, the five of us, to discuss the present and future of Amos. So there's actually quite a few things on the agenda today. Let me begin by with the San Francisco trip. So as you guys all know, I spent the last 2.5 weeks in probably the coolest city in the world. And my trip was really inspiring and energizing. I guess I can really divide it into two main parts. So as you guys probably know, the first week and a half, there was we were working quite a lot. I took a deep dive into GraphQL and Neo4j in order to kickstart that project, and we got a lot done. So great job, everyone. We should be proud of ourselves. I worked in this in the co-working space of the place I was staying at, which was called Startup Basecamp. It was a really cool place. So they were based in this place called Oasis Inn or Oasis Hotel. And they had obviously private rooms, but they also had shared rooms, which is the one I went for. It's $50 for a shared room of 4 people, but most of the time in the latter half of the trip, there were only 2 of us staying there. So only me and a friend of mine. So for $50, I think that's a pretty good deal. The Startup Basecamp also has locations, I think, in Silicon Valley and maybe one other place. I was in the SF location. In Silicon Valley, there's also Draper University, which was actually my first choice, but there they didn't have room because they had some program that was occurring there during the summer. What I really liked about the base camp was that it was a combination of co-living, co-working, and networking. Oh yeah, they have a limit of 1 month that you can stay in up to. And I was thinking that if I was to come again, then maybe I would come for 1 month, because there's another thing called Hack and Sleep, and they offer accommodation from 1 month onward, so minimum of 1 month. And the way and the way that works is, or the price is $1,800 per month. So if you think about it, if you're paying $50 a night, so that's $1,500 for a shared room, you might as well pay $1,800 for a private room. So I think that's a really cool thing. $1,800 is, like, in San Francisco, sort of, I would say, the average. I think you can get rooms a little bit cheaper, $1,400, $1,300, $1,500. But you know, if you can get for a fixed duration, like 1.5 months or so, for $1,800, and most importantly, you also get like a living room and a dedicated co-working space, and you get like this this sort of community of people that are experiencing Silicon Valley, then totally worth it. The people that I met were also really cool. So Shuvro was, or actually is, the CEO as well as the head of AI for a startup called Kryzen.com. Lucas was he has a startup in Brazil, and he's also a designer, and he created our Solvio logo. There was also Jack, who has a pretty cool AI startup for producers, film producers in Russia. It's pretty cool. You essentially upload like 8 hours of video content or however much you want, and then you specify how much you want it to get reduced to, and it picks the best shots from all of the content, and it reduces it into sort of a 4-minute movie. And you can also configure how much you want your face to be there versus general shots. So essentially, this is a tool where every single person can have their own after movie for any event with no labor, with no manual work. So that's a pretty cool idea. And then I also met Tiago, who is the CTO of an education startup that is actually very similar to what we're working on. So that was quite fun. And in general, quite a cool crowd. Yeah, I mean, Silicon Valley is definitely a great place, or the Bay Area, a great place. I really think that it would be useful if we are based there, and so we should do everything we can in order to get into Y Combinator, so that we can actually go there in January and spend 3 months there. From a visa perspective, obviously that's the hardest question of all. That's the $1 million question. USA, unlike most developed countries, does not have a startup visa program. Obama did try to introduce it, but he wasn't in power long enough. So, however, the U.S. government realizes this and sort of they're quite liberal when it comes to giving the other visas to entrepreneurs. So a lot of entrepreneurs go in on the O1 visa, which is, in the past, it was reserved for Nobel laureates, for Olympic athletes. I think Albert Einstein came into the US on this visa. But these days, it's given very often to precisely to entrepreneurs, to people who get into Y Combinator, etc. And in fact, I have a friend of mine who got this visa as well. And then I currently have a B1, B2, a 10-year B1, B2 in US, which essentially allows you to travel and do business. So you can't work, but you can do business. So you can do networking, etc. There is a possibility that we would be able to come in to Y Combinator on this B1, B2. I think it would be a little bit of a stretch for the definition of B1, B2, but if we sort of explain that, you know, the reason we're in Silicon Valley is for the networking, then that may be regarded as okay. Cool. So that was the first half of my trip. And then the second half, I was also doing a little bit more networking. Oh, also just the second day, I went to an education conference in Oakland, and that was okay. I mean, I also was describing later to my friend, and I told her that I almost fell asleep because it was actually kind of boring. But you know, that's where we come in. EdTech currently is selling to schools to organize their schools better and selling to teachers to organize their classes better. We're creating something from 0 to 1. So how interesting something is related to how revolutionary it is. Yeah, and then the latter half, I was also doing a lot of thinking about our product and stuff like that. I also managed to meet up with Ming Ming 2 times. So she's a Stanford graduate, and she also worked at Singularity University. She's a great person, and she's also part of our community. So she joined the Slack team a few weeks ago, and wants to take part more on this project. So that's really, really great news, and I'll be thinking of ways that we can include her in the project going forward. So let me now go into sort of what my thoughts about the future of the project are. Now, let me begin with a very high-level thought. So I realized that what we're doing is obviously trying to find a platform where people can learn in a more efficient way than is currently possible on the internet. And I realized that what we're sort of revolutionary in is the way that we're categorizing learning resources, correct? It's like the core of the recommendation engine or the search engine. The very core of it is what we're different in. And if this is true, then why restricted to learning resources? So I actually realized that, yeah, it's great. Let's build this exactly what we're doing, but in the future we can generalize it to other things than learning resources. So we're essentially building an interest-based recommendation engine. So here's what I mean. Let's say you study chemistry, then maybe a friend would, and you don't know about Breaking Bad, then maybe a friend of yours would recommend Breaking Bad to you, right? If you're into politics and you don't know about House of Cards, maybe a friend would recommend House of Cards to you. You're into US foreign politics or the Middle East, and maybe Homeland would be the right show to recommend to you. So here's an example where Netflix recommendations, fiction, culture, can be accomplished in the same way using our data structures. Another example is shopping, right? So like a Amazon thingy. So let's say you're an engineer or you want to learn engineering, then maybe an engineering kit would be the right product on Amazon. So this stuff doesn't apply to all products and all services. For example, some kitchen stuff, some kitchen appliances, well, that's very unlikely to be dependent on your academic background exactly. But I think that there are a lot of things, both physical products, digital products, and cultural products, where your academic background or your past or present or future interests are relevant when it comes to searching for stuff or being recommended stuff. So that's just a very interesting thought. Another thing is, what was it that I wanted to say? I forgot. So do you guys have any comments about this thing? Okay, so I'll continue and then we can discuss it. Ouch. Then we can discuss it all at the end. So here's how I think about our roadmap currently. We started the project about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. Initially, it was me, Ani, and Evgeny, and we had a lot of these what we called product calls, and we were sort of discussing how we're going to build the product. You can find them all on YouTube. And one of the questions that came up is, what kind of source of truth do we want, or what kind of consensus system do we want? So we were really deciding between two options. Either what we have currently, which is people go to the app, they can't see anything else than a form, and they submit a review, and that goes into our database, and then maybe in the future an algorithm can take some arithmetic average of all the reviews and can treat that average as its source of truth. Option two was to go with a canonical source of truth. So that's what Wikipedia uses. So the way Wikipedia works is somebody writes something, somebody else edits it, somebody else talks about it, writes a discussion, and then somebody else edits it more. And that's an option we could also go for. So somebody would post some metadata, and everybody could see it, everybody could discuss it, and everybody could edit it. So the reason we went for this approach is because it's easier for the users. All they have to do is they have to download our app or Chrome extension or whatnot, and they can help the community and categorizing the web's learning resources. If we find, however, that this approach does not create engagement for whatever reason, then we could also try the other approach. So the other approach would be much more sort of collaborative and community-based. So it would be much more sort of chatty and talkative. And if that's what what people prefer in order to engage in this stuff, we should do it. Another thing is I have thought about which feature we should build first, search or social networking features. And I believe it depends on the success of the MVP. So if we're getting a lot of categorizations, I think it makes sense to build search first. And if we do not, then I think it makes sense to build the social networking features first. So just to summarize the whole discussion, let's release the MVP as it is, of course. Then if we do get a lot of submissions, we introduce search immediately, and then we go for social networking features. If we don't get a lot of submissions, then we go one of two routes. Either we pivot to a central source of truth with sort of a talkative platform like Wikipedia, and we iterate on that, or we build social networking features. Yeah, so that would be a decision. Those are the two possible sort of changes that we could do if the MVP doesn't find product market fits in its current form. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about was this idea of what is the best approach for making this project happen. Now, we decided to build an app to go to the B2C route, which is great. And but let's say this doesn't work out. Let's say none of this works out. We try everything and we can't find PMFT. We can't find product market fit PMF for a very long time. Then what should we do then? So I think there would be two approaches. I think the first one would be to change to B2B sort of. So I was just in San Francisco the other day, and you go on Market Street, the main street, and like one of the companies that are based on Market Street is Wikipedia. So assuming that they do have some kind of chief innovation officer, we could literally pitch the idea of Amos as another Wikimedia project. So Wikimedia Foundation has a lot of projects, but by far their most popular one is a product called Wikipedia. I think that Amos is an incredible idea, and it could even integrate with Wikipedia down the line. In fact, they're already doing that. I think from Wikipedia articles you can get links to like their education project. I forgot what it was called. Wikiversity, I think it's called. Their education platform. And the other approach to going B2B would be to sort of stick with B2C, but go for a more long-term approach. And that means with blockchain. So ideas of decentralization have been part of this project for a long time, and we decided to go with a centralized app to begin with, because it's sort of like, if we can succeed in this, then we can do anything. Like, that's the holy grail. If you can get a lot of users with an app, then you have the power to centralize, decentralize, whatever you want. In particular, you have the power to decentralize after that. But if this, for whatever reason, we struggle, then the approach would be to go the long-term route instead, which is, you know, start building a platform on top of IPFS, seek funding not from sort of incubators or seed funds or sort of venture philanthropists, but rather from blockchain companies such as IPFS, to get a grant from them, be part of the blockchain community, attend the conferences, and really sell the idea, because that's what current blockchain companies are doing. Is the product takes a very long time to build, so rather than selling a product, they're selling ideas, which is, you know, usually not the mantra in the startup world, obviously, but blockchain is different due to the technological or the development cycle being multiple times longer than in the traditional world. So we could go that route, yeah. Of course, just to recap, selling a product is the holy grail over selling an idea. So that's what we're going with right now. But our project is so wide that we could also pivot and sell an idea. That's also something that we have a lot to offer as well. Cool. And the last thing that's on my table is funding. So I think this ties in beautifully well with what I said. So I think we should really go. Okay, let me start with this. Y Combinator winter deadline is open. So that's great news. So let me go to ycombinator.com/apply. And let me open myself up to man in the middle attack. There we go. So, yeah, it's open. And the application deadline is September 25. And we'll hear back by October 16. So this is great news. And so my decision would be, let's stick with the nonprofit route for the next 2 months. And let's apply to Y Combinator for the nonprofit route, which is very, very soon. So yeah, just to recap, right now it's July 9. So this is in approximately 2 months and some change. It's approximately in 10 weeks. So that gives us 10 weeks to find product market fit, which I think is great because it's a little bit on the short side. So it's in fact motivating and inspiring to hustle. Right? There's a law that your work will always fill up the time that is required for it. So right now we have a 10-week, or let's say 8-week deadline to find product market fit. Assuming we find product market fit from the very first release of the product, that would be the best. Let's say we grow 100% per week, then by week 10, we'll achieve 1,000 users. Paul Graham says that startups are impressive if they can achieve double-digit weekly growth for a long time. So I think if we hit that metric, we'll be on our way. That would be definitely, I think, a sufficient condition for us to be interesting on the traction side. However, what if that doesn't work out for whatever reason? What if we can't get users, or we don't get into Y Combinator? Then I would say we think about switching to for-profit. And in particular, looking back at the previous discussion, if we are still going with the product sort of approach, then we might just raise regular funding, seed funding, and be done with it. If we're going the blockchain route, then we might want to issue a token. Maybe let me sort of add an appendix of what my thoughts are on the centralized versus decentralized space. So the reason I here's the deal. Even if we are successful from the product side and get into Y Combinator, nonprofit, everything, then I still think that in the future we should transition to a decentralized company. And here's why. I do not want to build a Web 2.0 company because I don't think that legacy management techniques are efficient. I mean, everybody knows that they're not efficient. It's just, I also think that we can do better. In fact, that things like DAOs do better. So, let's say we build this company and somebody's the CEO. I don't know, let's say I'm the CEO. It's just, there's a lot of pressure on the head, or like, it's a central point of failure, right? The regular legacy structured companies have central point failures all the way down. So if you think about it, the CEO is a point of failure. The entire C-suite is a point of failure. So if the CTO fails or the CMO or the CEO fails, well then everything in that department fails. From a sales perspective, I do not want to be setting up ahead of America, ahead of Europe. Again, big points of failure. If the head of Europe fails, the whole of Europe is failing. So you can think of traditional management structures as trees. Obviously, it's a hierarchy, and whoever fails, the whole subtree fails. It's not a very rigid, or it's a very fragile structure. So nowadays, there's a lot of research and a lot of talk into things called DAOs, which, to be honest, is just a really, really, really fancy way of saying something very, very simple. And that is like a board of directors. That's pretty much what it is. A DAO is where you give token holders tokens, and then they vote on proposals, and whichever proposal gets upvoted gets executed. Two things that I'll add. First one is, who will hold the tokens? So that's the tricky one, and that's one thing that I'll be sort of going through my head very, very passively in the next few weeks. There's one option to do it kind of a top-down approach, to give it to universities or professors or governments. There's an option to have a token sale. There's an option to give it to the students, have a 100% student-run education system. Now that's an idea worth thinking about. And the second question was, okay, Dom, DAOs are great, but they suck. They can't do much. They can't have a bank account. They can't set up a Twitter page. They can't publish apps to the App Store. They can't even have a GitHub account. All of that stuff requires an email address and or a legal company. So that's where this concept of legally linked DAOs is relevant. Now, I've been thinking about all of this for a very long time, and In fact, if you look at, we had this thing called the Solvio Forum some while back, and if you look there, we've actually been discussing, or when I say we, it's mostly me, posting some thoughts about that particular topic. I believe I posted it in governance. Yeah, exactly. I posted in governance. And so you can read that. It's kind of you can think of it as a short blog post. And then I went to a conference called DEF CON, and actually turns out that there were two presentations that were exactly on that idea that I was already thinking about in February. Sorry, it wasn't DEF CON, it was ECC actually. And the idea is setting up a legal entity that has in its statutes or in its sort of foundation rules and directives that it must follow the decisions of the DAO, as long as it doesn't violate any laws that the entity is operating in. The presentations were claiming that this is doable. I just shared my messages with everyone, so that's why we don't do these sessions live. I will edit it out. I actually tweeted about this. Is that me? How can I? Oh, perfect. Oh, here. So I actually posted a tweet about this. Can a U.S. charity, because that's ideally what we would want, because U.S. charities can get donations from any U.S.-based citizens or legal persons, and you can deduct it from your taxes. Can be controlled by a DAO. And then I'm happy to also pay for anyone who's an expert in this. The only disadvantage is that, first of all, there are not that many people who know a lot about this topic. And second of all, that you can't really know a lot about this topic because nobody knows a lot about this topic. Because the regulation is not clear. So the people that consider themselves lawyers in this field are really researchers, and also they communicate with government, because the laws and regulations around this are not clear. So that would be sort of the like vision for the very future of the project, is that we're able to have a legal entity. So have, you know, everything GitHub account, of Twitter page, and publish to app stores, as well as accept tax-free donations, but also get the benefits of having a decentralized voting structure that is much more granular and much more easy to distribute and much more efficient than something like a board of directors. Because you can literally give a user of your platform one token, and now they have 10 millionth, for example, of the voting right in the whole project. From my side, that's it. What do you guys think? Tell me your thoughts. Great. So why don't we have the backend call in that case? Hello?
Yeah, we can have that.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we went through quite a lot of topics. So just to summarize, yeah, I mean, SF trip, We talked about the generalizations of this into a recommendation engine. Oh yeah, and there I actually did want to mention something. So I've also been, yes, perfect. So there's one more topic. Um, so one of my responsibilities is to get the topic graph done, correct? And that I realized is a little bit tricky. It's a little bit harder than I thought, but we can do it. So one thing that I've been looking at is like actual categorizing some resources, obviously. And I almost get the feeling that the best thing to categorize initially would be precisely uh, Netflix. In particular, for example, stuff that is like there's three categories, right? There's fiction, like Breaking Bad and House of Cards. On the other side, there's like actual documentaries or docu-series. Like, for example, I think all of this stuff here, these are all docu-series on Netflix, sorted by Rotten Tomatoes. And then there's something in the middle, which is stuff that has a fictional tone, but it's actually based on reality. And those are great. Things like The Last Tsars, The Crown, Tudors, Medici. You can learn a lot about a lot of topics by watching a show. And I think that some of the first resources to categorize we should go for is exactly those last two categories. Why? And the reason is because I just think that like friends recommend to friends fiction stuff a lot, right? Like culture, and it's going to be easier to, yeah, it's going to provide value to the users. So did I phrase that well? And so I discovered this website called the unofficial Netflix global search, and it's really, really good. It actually also, not only does it have, I believe, the full catalog of everything, you can also filter which countries it's available in, and believe it or not, somehow my country made the cut. So that's another perk. And so let's see if India's here. Oh, nice, India's here. I don't think Kazakhstan here. At least we can't see it. No. And then we obviously move on to a lot of other stuff. I would say Product Hunt has a range of great, really great education resources. One second, just write something down. So that's something we could look into. Khan Academy, obviously. TED Talks. I think that's another great thing that should be like one of the first. In particular, I think that, you know, obviously we should do some categorization ourselves. There's no doubt about that. But the more interesting question is like the more interesting thing is building communities, vertical communities that are able to categorize these things. So, you know, there's like the horizontal way to look at it, or like, which is by domain. So maybe we have a computer science community and they're doing everything on computer science. So that includes, you know, all the platforms, YouTube, Product Hunt, TED, Netflix, and other fields as well. Or we do it sort of vertically by platform. So there's a community that does just TED, a community that does just Netflix, and so on. And the last thing that I wanted to say was there's this really interesting idea that we're essentially bringing back Yahoo directories. So, you know, in the past, the way you came across stuff like back in the 90s was there were like site directories and you would look up a site. It was kind of like the yellow pages of the internet. And then Google came along and introduced this sort of syntactic search, or at least that's what I call it. What we're doing is we're sort of bringing categorization back, but with much more rich metadata. And I really think that there is room for both. I think that a semantic approach has a lot of value. In fact, I think it's one of our earliest goals should be that for anything that takes longer than 1 hour, we provide better results than Google. So anything that you want to learn and spend more than 1 hour on it, we want Amos to provide better search results. I think that's a really good goal to strive for. Yeah, I think there was one more thing. Oh yeah, and then just last thing. Yeah. One last thing, and then I'll be done.
Sure.
So I realized how revolutionary our like data models are. If you look at Amazon, let's say you look at Amazon and you look up some book. Okay, it looks like I have this random book in my history. So then you scroll down and you look at the categories, right? So it's like, why do they have? Why are these categories? Why do they form a tree? It just doesn't make sense. There are so many categories that fall under multiple parents. It's so obvious that it should not be a tree structure. It should be a graph. It should be a DAG structure. Actually, in the past, they used to sort of show also the parent categories, but now they don't show it. So it looks like these nodes just belong to different branches, and it's like it doesn't make sense. So that's really the core of the whole thing is finding the best data structures for modeling learning profiles and learning preferences. So the way it was solved in the past is people used trees, and then they realized, okay, so one book may belong into like multiple nodes on the tree. So then they have like, okay, so now books can belong into 3 categories, but not more. I think it's much better to realize that fields themselves can have multiple parents and to model it that way. And then it's just like there's custom reviews, right? But they're just they package together so many things. Like if you actually read the reviews, some of them are like, yes, this book was good or this book was bad. But then some of them are like, my book arrived sort of not in good condition. Another one would be like, the Kindle edition does not have graphs. So it's like so many stuff is bundled together. And the end result is that the rating system is not that credible. And even if we put aside all of the sort of like publishing stuff, then even then, if somebody rates it as 5 stars, how do I know if it's good for me? That's what I'm interested in. Like this book on shell scripting, is it an introductory book or is it a book for experts? I don't know that by looking at the star review. So I really believe that, the internet loves stars and ratings and stuff. But I think that especially when it comes to learning resources, it's much more about the fit. It's much more about the object consumer relationship than it is about the object itself. It's not an IKEA product where you can say, was it durable? Did it break? It's much more about what works for you. So I think that every resource is perfect for one person. And I really like the idea that we're going with a rich metadata set rather than a simple 1 to 5 review system. You guys wanted to say something? Now's the time.
So I was just going to ask something. You said anything that takes more than 1 hour on Google should be provided by Amos, which sounds really cool. But how do we measure it, or do the users come back to us and say this particular process is taking a lot of time, and then that's why I want this particular thing to be on Amos?
Right. Yeah, great. I don't have an answer just yet. Great question though. We should definitely specify and define our KPIs. Yeah. Facebook, I believe, has two main KPIs, which is very interesting. One of their main KPIs is how long it takes you to get 10 friends from initial registration. Because they found that if you get 10 friends, you are very likely to stay on. And it was not just the correlation. They actually found a causal relationship, which kind of makes sense. And so that was this. They used this KPI in their early days, and nowadays they use a slightly different main KPI, which is also interesting. At what index is the first post that you react to in your newsfeed? So if the first post that you react to, comment, or like is like number 5 in your newsfeed, they're doing a bad job in ordering the newsfeed. So they want that whenever you open the Facebook app, you always interact with the first post. So that's a very interesting KPI to measure the performance of their recommendation engine.
I see. Yeah. So, but then should it be integrated with Facebook or via Facebook, or a person should have a Facebook account to do this?
No, I mean, this was what I just said was off topic. I did not mean any deep relationship with Facebook's KPI.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. We should specify the KPIs as soon as possible. So without further ado, I think what's the plan for the project at the moment? Back end, we're about to have a call, so that's great. Front end, I think we should discuss after the back end call. Maybe, yeah. So from my side, that's it. Cool. Let's start a new call, guys. So thanks a lot for joining. Thanks a lot for watching. Head over to solvio.org in order to join our amazing community, and let's change the world. See you later.